Hey, what's up, Buffalo Bill fans? I want to apologize for doing the lost season video. Not that I don't believe any of the stuff I said in the video to be true. It was just I was very frustrated, obviously, as you could see, and did a little bit of cursing, which I don't normally do. It's not really my style, but it's very frustrating watching this team this past season. To have start out so well and then just to flounder the way they have in the last 5 games. It's just really, it's really frustrating, and just the way that they've been for the last, how many years now? It doesn't even seem real almost. It's such a long drought since winning the division. I think it's been since 1995 they haven't won the division. It's been since 1999 since they've been to the playoffs, and you still have that bitter Music City Miracle crap in our mouth, and it just doesn't seem like it gets any better. The comeback by Dallas last season on Monday night, just the constant mediocrity, and even sometimes worse. It's just very, very frustrating, and I think I've tried to figure out some of the problems, and I want to share them with the rest of the Bills fans out there, and I wonder if you were of the same opinion as I am, or maybe you could share your opinions on why you think the team hasn't returned to form or been able to be as successful as we'd like them to be. And I think it starts from the top. Really, it resonates from the top, and I think it's been the lack of a general manager who's been competent on draft day. I think the Bills have missed on a lot of picks, obviously, and it's just kind of lended itself to what we see now on the football field. We've seen just a lack of talent, a lack of impact players, especially on defense, somewhat offense, but especially on defense. There's not, I've said this before, there's not one player on that defensive side of the ball that opposing coaches have to look at and say, well, we have to stop that player. And I think that definitely does hinder the Bills. If you look at what Buffalo's done in the draft, with Donahoe, even Jerry Butler's last couple of drafts left a lot to be desired, especially the last one. That was the Eric Flowers draft. Travarius Tillman was the second-round pick. It just none of those guys, I don't think any of those guys were worth their salt that got drafted in that 2000 class. Then the 2001 class Clements was a good player, but Schobel's been a good player, but is he, like I've said before, we're not going to mistake him for a Dwight Freeney, an Umenyiora, or a Tuck, or any of those guys. We're definitely not going to do that. And from there on out, you've had a lot of hit or miss guys. Evans is a nice player. He's definitely, I think, a top 15 receiver in the league, but he's not a top 10 or top 5. I mean, I think the lack of size has something to do with that. So I just think you're left with a lot of questions, especially in the latter part of the draft for the first and second round. Willis McGahee, what a huge bust right there, coming to Buffalo. He talked his way out of town. Mike Williams, probably one of the biggest busts in Buffalo Bill draft history. Traded a few first-round picks for quarterbacks who never panned out. I mean, going back further, Rob Johnson back in 98, 97, 98. Then more recent, Drew Bledsoe, traded for a first-round pick. Then Rob Johnson traded for a first and a second. Also, John McCargo traded for a second and a third. These aren't, these players just have not added up to much in Buffalo, and I think that's where the problem lies, is the lack of competence on draft day, and also bringing in the right type of player. Also, that's another thing that I'm going to touch on here. Buffalo's adopted this ideology of bringing in undersized players, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Undersized, quick to the ball, flying around type of defensive player. again, undersized, high character guys, and that's obviously doesn't work. I don't need a nice guy on the football field, to be honest with you. I want mean, nasty, physical football players, and I think we're still seeing the same reasons why Buffalo lost their 4 Super Bowls. We're still seeing the same problem, and you know what that problem is? On most Sundays, when they line up, they're not the most physical team on the field. They're not. And I think we've seen that as evidence the last couple of weeks when it came down to making big stops late in games. Teams were able to just line up and move them off the ball and go on game-killing drives, 8+ minutes for the Jets, 9+ minutes against the Pats, and it's just painfully obvious that the same problems that have plagued this team for a long time are still plaguing them. And I don't understand why that they can't see it, the people on the top. I mean, another thing, Buffalo Bill fans, I don't know if you realize this, Modrak is sort of the GM, kind of the guy who scouts the talent, brings it in, but who brought him in? Tom Donahoe. Tom Donahoe brought him in, so you got to believe that they're of the same opinion, of the same philosophy of picking and drafting players. Levy was window dressing. He lasted a season or so. It was just basically, I think, a PR move to try to keep fans interested. So I think until they get a guy who understands the game as it's played today and is committed to bringing in bigger, more physical football players onto this team, particularly on defense, we're not going to see change until you commit to bringing in better weapons for Trent Edwards on offense and better coaching. I think that there's and lies obviously the second problem is the coaching, and that stems from the guy who's bringing in the coaches. It's painfully obvious there that they're just the coaching has been and if you're going to be a smaller team, I guess maybe less talented or undersized, the least you could expect is that you're going to be the better prepared team. And watching last night's game against the Jets and the Patriots just further frustrated me, because now we've seen the other two division teams in the East, both the Jets and the Dolphins, go into New England, get victories, and rack up a lot of points. Buffalo, let's forget about that garbage touchdown late in the game, was only able to muster 3. If you want to make it look nice, 10, but still, that just, it does not impress me in the least, and I just think that resonates from the head coach and the kind of player that they bring in. I did some further looking into it. On defense, Buffalo only averages 237 pounds on the defensive line. The rest of the teams, and particularly in the linebacker core, they only average 232 pounds. The Pats, 303.7 on the linebackers, they average 245.7. The Jets, 309.5 in the defensive line, 255 in the linebackers. The Dolphins, 303.7 on the line, 251.8 in the linebackers. Now, one will say, well, they run a 3-4 defense where the linemen tend to be bigger. This is true, but if you look at their linebackers, the majority of the rest of the teams in the East linebackers, the Pats, the Jets, and the Dolphins, a lot of them used to be defensive ends in college or even in the pros. I know Bruschi was a defensive end in college. Vrabel was a defensive end in college. Adalius Thomas was also played some end for the Baltimore Ravens. Huge guy. You look at the Jets, Calvin Pace, Brian Thomas, David Bowens. So you don't have to look too far. Even the Dolphins, Joey Porter has put his hand in the dirt sometimes, and Matt Roth was a college defensive end. So these guys are used to putting their hand in the dirt and taking on bigger offensive linemen and bigger blockers. So once, look no further to that than once Buffalo's defense if they can get a block on the much bigger line that they're facing in the East, then they've got to contend with guys who are used to attacking them as well, who are used to putting their hand in the dirt and going against offensive linemen. Just basically what I'm saying is they're undersized on all fronts. They're facing bigger front sevens and front eights than what they're facing, and I'm a firm believer you're only as good as the people you practice against. So meanwhile, in Buffalo's OTAs, their practices, their mini camps, their offensive line is playing against a lot much smaller guy, a lot smaller, that they're practicing against their own team. Basically, they're playing up against much smaller guys. And then when they finally get into games where they're, live contact, there's, the gloves are off per se, they're getting overwhelmed sort of at the point of attack because they're not used to facing that kind of mass. And just lends itself to saying that they're still not the more physical team on Sunday. And if Marshawn can get to the second level of defense, he's still facing a much more bigger physical guy. And I'm of the opinion if you can get both big and fast, you do it. This small, fast thing just does not work, and that's been obvious. And I would think you Bills fans would agree with me, especially what we've seen for a while now. And on the offensive line, Buffalo does average more weight than the other teams, but that also means they're not athletic enough to get out to the second level and make blocks downfield. Are they physical enough? Are they, ornery and mean enough? We don't know that. We really don't know that, and I don't think that they've shown that they can be. I really don't think that they've shown that they can be, and I think until Buffalo recognizes these problems and addresses these problems, we're still going to continue to see the same issues year in and year out. With Aaron Schobel out of the lineup, I mean, there's no pass rush whatsoever. Quarterbacks can kind of go back there and comb their hair, check their selves in the mirror. Chris Kelsey, I never realized this till I looked at the stats the other day. Chris Kelsey and Ryan Denny. Kelsey 16 career sacks, Denny 18 career sacks. That is bad. That is not good. If you're starting defensive ends, one due to injury, of course, is only. I mean, there's been some ends that have had good seasons that have gotten that in one season. That's just definitely not going to cut it. That's just that's something that absolutely has to be addressed this offseason is people that can get to the passer, and Buffalo needs to get a little bit bigger in the front seven, particularly in the linebacker core. I would look into trying to move Kavika to the middle, possibly pause to the outside, I think, and then Crowell is pretty much gone. Get yourself a real nice big Sam linebacker on that side, and just, if you're going to continue to run the 4-3 defense that you're running currently, barring that the coaching staff, or maybe if there is a new regime in place, comes in and implements a 4-3 defense, I have no problem with the secondary, but your secondary is only as good as your pass rush. If you don't get any rush up front, there's only so long those guys can cover, receivers in this league. It's just point blank. And I'll continue to defend Trent Edwards. I think he's a good young quarterback. I heard some interviews with Thurman Thomas, Joe Delamelier. Those are guys that are very well respected in Buffalo, and they said it themselves. You have to run the football. You have to give this guy time to maturate as a young quarterback, and you have to have a diversified game plan. You have to run the football. You have to keep defenses honest and off balance. And Buffalo, their coaching staff and their play calling has pretty much conceded the fact that they don't have any confidence in it, regardless of what they say in interviews. Regardless of what they say, they don't have any confidence. And personally, what I would do if I was in charge of this football team, if I was brought in charge of this football team, I would definitely see to it that there was a general manager in place with the right kind of attitude, who's in touch with what's going on in the league as it is today. Going to bring in a whole different scouting department, because this one obviously just isn't bringing in the kind of players that you need to win in this league. It's just not. Buffalo can get some cute wins here and there against some average or below average teams, but once they face the big boys, or teams that have gotten better, they kind of wilt. Whether it be being out-muscled or out-coached. And against New England last week, they were both. They were out-coached and out-muscled. And then you bring a coach and a coaching staff in that's going to instill an attitude and a mindset in this team that they're going to go out there and be physical. That they're going to go out there each and every Sunday and pound people. And that's what you need. That's the kind of coach you need in here. Not a passive, mild-mannered coach who's kind of just resigned to trying to play not to lose. And that's what we've seen from Duran. We've seen very passive, play not to lose football, and that obviously doesn't cut it. That's just his nature, and that's not going to change. Isn't. Having good special teams and some of the best special teams in the NFL is nice, but we've seen Bills fans over the last 4 or 5 seasons that just doesn't win a lot of NFL games. It's, a few sexy punt kickoff returns here and there, but does not win NFL football games on the greater scale. Just doesn't do it. And then I would draft some bigger linebackers, definitely some bigger defensive ends, and some interior linemen. I would just spend the whole draft on guys that are going to be big and physical up front and on the second level of defense with the linebackers. And until you start doing that, I don't think we're going to see any bit of change. I hope that there will be change. I mean, I hope they can get a win this Monday and just kind of turn things around, get the morale going again. But they can't afford to lose any one of these next 3 games coming up. They're playing inferior teams. I don't want to say inferior coach teams, because I don't think much of Buffalo's coaching staff, and this coaching staff has been here, some through the Malarkey era, good majority through obviously the Duran era, and it's it just doesn't seem to be working out. I think if we see this team lose one of these upcoming games, I think we're going to resign ourselves to another 7-9, 8-8 season, and that just doesn't. If that's the case, I think there needs to be a change at the top. I think there needs to be a change in the coaching department and the philosophy of how you bring in players and how you draft players. So I just wanted to hear what you fans think about that. Get Trent more weapons in here. Don't allow teams to double up Lee Evans and just say, you know what, well, they really don't trust any of these other receivers to make plays, or they're just incapable of making plays, and now we can play 8-9 in the box and just force them to be one-dimensional. Take away Lee with 2, force them to be one-dimensional, single cover everybody else, and that's basically what's been going on. So don't get down on Trent. Look no further than Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco. The reason those guys are doing so well in this league so early in their career, because both their teams rank 2nd and 3rd in the league in rushing. So the proof's in the pudding. Eli Manning, same thing. The proof's in the pudding. You finally start running the ball with an attitude, playing physical up front. On the other side of the ball, you're getting after the quarterback, making life miserable on that side. You're going to win games. Football's not complicated. Just want to hear what you fans think about my theories and my thoughts about the team. And thanks for the positive feedback from the season loss video. It's just very frustrating, and I hope we can get a big win on Sunday, and let's go Bills. I'll talk to you guys again.